So I think that those are probably the four things that I'd say, which would be rethinking the UI, UX, the learner interface, expanding the integrations, using those integrations to develop dynamic courses and training content. And then the fourth would be personalization of both that content as well as a coach that can help you get jobs done.
Yo, it's the future, don't hit the snooze. AI is here giving humans the boost. Team Humans rolling, brains in the game with Dan Turchin. Y'all remember the name. People reign in the mix, no stopping the flow. Better work, better life, yeah, we're ready to go. Robots and humans, a collab, you know. Okay, let's start the show.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI in the Future of Work, episode 371. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for HR and IT employee service. Our community is growing. If you haven't yet subscribed to the weekly newsletter, why haven't you? It's a great place to get to know the guests a little bit better. We often share some fun facts that don't always make it into the main episode. We'll share a link to subscribe in the show notes. We are all in this together. Help us grow that community by sharing this episode with just one friend. That's all we ask. They'll know that you care about using AI to make humans better. And if someone you know shared this with you, pay it forward. Tell them thank you, and go ahead and invite one new friend to join the community. If you leave a comment, I just may share it in an upcoming episode like this one from Larit in Pensacola, Florida, who is a lab director. Larit's favorite episode is the one from back in season 4 with Robert Plotkin, popular author and expert in AI IP law, about regulation for LLMs and legal advice for entrepreneurs. It's a good one. We'll share a link to it in the show notes. We learn from AI thought leaders weekly on the show. Of course, the added bonus, you get one AI fun fact. Here it is for today. Paige McLaughlin writes in HR Brew that workers want to harness AI for learning, but they've not yet grasped how to use it effectively. In it, she writes that 86% of workers are motivated to use AI to learn new skills, according to a survey of more than 500 adults commissioned by EdAssist. When asked their motivations for upskilling with AI, 45% said they're using it to help them be more efficient with new learning opportunities and picking up new skills. Gen Z is more likely to embrace AI tools. 43% of Gen Zers want to pursue AI upskilling to achieve better work-life balance, compared with 35% of all respondents. And 42% want to pursue AI upskilling to allow them to focus on more meaningful work, compared to 31% of overall respondents. The challenge employers face is addressing that many workers lack the skills to understand if they're prompting AI correctly and evaluating the quality of what AI gives back. There's a lot more to the article. We'll, of course, share a link in the show notes. My commentary, most of what this commission study reveals is obvious. What's less obvious is what the study didn't address. That skills development at work, and for that matter, in all facets of life, should be driven by passion, purpose, and a desire to do more of what matters. The cultural phenomenon that is AI shouldn't drive employee or employer interest in upskilling. It should be driven by a desire to do better work that's more fulfilling. Every conversation about upskilling should begin with an assessment of how we want those new skills to improve our lives. The skills journey should be motivated by a desire to be a better employee, parent, spouse, friend. We should aspire to do more of what we love. Placing the focus on learning how to use AI as a skill first is like, say, owning a car, but never driving it off the lot. Skills are not an end. In fact, the only reason to learn about AI or anything else is so we can achieve something greater. Career uncertainty caused by AI is the perfect opportunity to find that something greater. Now shifting to this week's very important conversation. Kimberly Williams is the CEO of Absorb Software, which is used by more than 3,300 organizations and 34 million employees to define the learning process at work. Kimberly also serves on the boards of Equilend and True Commerce. Before Absorb, Kimberly was CEO of Consumer Safety Technology, a $200 million private equity-owned consumer electronics IoT business. She also served as president of Restaurant Technology Services and Application Development International, a global point-of-sale software company. Kimberly serves on the Enterprise Software CEO Roundtable, which brings together 50 of her peers from the likes of Workday, OpenText, and UKG, and on the Tampa membership committee for the Women's Corporate Directors Association. She received her BBA from the Ross School at the University of Michigan, go Big Blue, and her MBA from the Booth School at the University of Chicago. And without further ado, Kimberly, it's my pleasure to welcome you to AI in the Future of Work. Let's get started by hearing you share a bit more about that illustrious background and how you got to where you are today.
Great, Dan. Thank you again for having me. It's always a joy to talk about learning and specifically how AI is transforming how people learn at work. I started my career as a strategy consultant for the Boston Consulting Group, but another really strong technology evolution, which was the kind of consumer-facing internet, offered me the opportunity to move into the technology space and into my first general manager role. So after writing various business plans for internet businesses, the company I work for gave me funding to start up 2 different software companies. At the time, we called them application service providers because the term SaaS had not yet been invented, but in fact, they were pretty much SaaS businesses. So one was kind of a Shopify type business that enabled catalog and retail companies to sell their products online. And the second was pretty close today, what we call the website house, where we brought together content and commerce for the shelter category. And since those days in the 90s, I've led a large range of different technology companies. And it's just kind of gotten in my blood and always looking, because I've lived through a couple of different technology evolutions in my career. When AI really came along, especially generative AI, it felt like I was reliving these evolutions once again. And this is probably the most powerful of all of them.
Brilliant. We've had a lot of interesting conversations on this podcast about work tech and HR tech. We've had Josh Bersin, an analyst, on the show a couple times, and John Boudreau and others who I consider really some of the pioneers and leaders in the space. I've been looking forward to this conversation because we haven't specifically talked about the role of the LMS, the learning management system, and maybe how AI is influencing the process of not just LMS as a technology, but learning new skills at work. Maybe just share your perspective on where the field is and where it's headed.
Yeah, I think that, there's a few different things that are happening. So like when we think about traditional learning and development, a lot of what that team did was they would try to assess what are the common needed skills across the organization and how do I develop learning programs that appeal to large cohorts of these learners. So it could be, people who have high potential, and here are the typical types of skills and competencies that they need. Here's new leader training and the type of skills and competencies they need. And so I think the biggest shift that we're seeing is that AI enables us to identify the learning need at not just this cohort level, but at the individual level. And so as a new leader, maybe I'm struggling with certain aspects of being a new leader, but other ones I have down and I don't really need training in those areas. And so the same with high potential people. So there could be high potentials that already are great leaders and have done a lot of strategy work in the past, but you have other high performance people that really, they've been in functions where they haven't had to do strategy work or they haven't had to lead large numbers of people. And so the ability of AI to personalize at the learner level is one of the big shifts that we see within corporate learning and development. And so, the ability to understand what an employee is doing well and where they can improve to take their performance to the next level is very individualized. And AI has the potential to help us tap into that information at the learner level and then offer the training required to boost those skills. I think the other major component is that typically learning and development takes people out of their job and brings them either into a virtual or physical classroom for training of different kind. And we see it going much more towards in the moment type coaching and helping you. We talk a lot about experiential learning, but helping you through doing your job or doing a project so that you do it better. So, for example, like the AI coach that we have, you can, have it simulate with you a hard conversation you might have with an employee. Or I often use it for things like, here is my acquisition integration plan. What am I missing? Those types of things where I might take a first pass at something, but then the AI coach helps me find, hey, you didn't think about this aspect of it. Think more about your stakeholder management for your customers. You've thought a lot about how you're going to manage employees through it. You've thought a lot about how you're going to manage the board through it and how you're going to report, but you don't have much on how you're managing your customers, as an example. So I think this taking it from kind of an organization wide, how do I develop the right curriculum and courses, to thinking about how do I have a system that gives employees, a special personalized course made just for them, or some sort of hint or trick or guidance on a project. And so I think that AI really will transform how our corporate employees learn.
You and I share a common vision that the AI is there to assist you, help you upskill, help you love work more. And yet, we also got to admit that there are a lot of employees who are apprehensive and feel like maybe the role of the learning technology is to extract knowledge out of me that will be used to replace me with AI. How do you address that growing group of employees that don't feel the same way you and I do?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back, Dan, to our people leader meeting that we had. It was over 2 years ago now. And I told them a story. I said, I was in the workplace when email really started to be used regularly, believe it or not. So before that, it's crazy how would you communicate, but it was not. It would be memos that you would get. It would be other things. And the internet, at about the same time, the email really came in as the main way that people communicated. And at the time, our CEO didn't know how to use his email. And so he would have his admin print out every email. He would handwrite the response, and then his admin would type in the response. And while it worked, sort of, he would have been much more effective if he had, forced himself to learn and embrace that new technology. And you don't want to be the CEO who doesn't know how to use email, is what I told them. And it won't be easy, and you have to force yourself to find reasons to use it. So it's almost like your first, I have a task. How can I use AI? As opposed to the other way around, where, it's kind of the last thing you might do. And I would say that helped us as an organization. We definitely saw a lot of innovation. So I'll give you an example. The person who runs A/B testing on our website, where you have landing pages and you're trying to figure out performance-wise, you're often looking at your most high-volume pages to do that and develop the strategy. And you often don't have time to do the long tail of pages. And so they built this AI agent that would go in and help them think through at these longer tail pages how they improve performance without necessarily themselves having to devote a lot of time to it. So we had these, and we had lots of them, a lot of these really interesting use cases that people adopted. But we didn't feel like it was going fast enough. So I think it was May of this year, I assigned each functional leader. So let's say you were the managing payroll, or you were HR business partner, or you were the person who did SEO, the person who did PPC, whatever it might be, like you led a function. I said, I would like you or someone on your team to look at how AI is helping in your function. And then I sat through and which of those might be applicable to absorb. And so then I, listened to, 2 days of these functional leaders reading out to me. And that also then, I think, was another step function. So people started to use it more because they found, hey, our billing vendor has this module and we can actually use that to help us with collections type of a thing. So there was another step function change there. And then we picked a couple of corporate projects that we then had readouts on that were things that we heard across different functions. And so we decided, hey, let's attack these cross-functionally. Those included how do we build on top of our knowledge sources, like on top of SharePoint, on top of our system where we store our marketing collateral, on top of our Gong calls where we store, have our sales calls and so forth, our customer-facing calls. How do we lay on top of that a large language model plus some proprietary scripts and so forth to give us better intelligence about the business? So it allowed us to prioritize some of those projects like that and work on them. And that has helped drive usage. And then I would also say the most recent thing we did was develop a dashboard of every department in the company and what percentage of their companies or their employees within that department were using AI every day, every week, every month. And takes a while because there's a lot of AI tools. So you have to kind of build something to pull that data for all of those tools. But no one wants to be last on a leaderboard. So that was like some immediate like, oh my gosh, I need to encourage this with my team. So I think those are some of the things that we've done to encourage our employees more broadly to use AI on a regular basis.
I would say the cohort of employees that is feeling most threatened by AI is the kind of early career, maybe new grads, that sort of thing. What's your coaching to that younger crowd that is really feeling like they're getting squeezed out of the job market? How should they think about building a career, and maybe both from the perspective of the employee, but also from the perspective of an employer and the CEO of an LMS company? How should they think about the job market?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. When I go back to some of my early jobs, there was a lot of work that was quite boring. And I remember my first internship, I came home like, oh my gosh, they want me to make copies. Like we still had hard copies of things. They want me to make copies. And it felt beneath me in terms of like, it wasn't challenging my intellect and I really wanted to work on hard problems and so forth. So I think one would be to think about how do you eliminate the kind of the repetitive drudgery of jobs so you can focus on the very high value activities. Because if you can devote most of your week to those higher thought areas, you are going to develop faster, right? So, I had to spend, 30 hours of my 40 hours when I first started doing things that weren't challenging me intellectually. If I were going to go back, I would try to figure out how to get those 30% into, using AI to help me accomplish those much faster so I could spend more on the higher value activities and accelerate my learning curve. So I think that would be, embracing the fact, like being smart enough to recognize that this piece of my job I can automate and that will allow me to spend time here. I think that's one lens I'd try to have. It's frustrating, I know sometimes, but that would be one lens. I think the second is how do you identify where to spend your time if you are freeing up your time? So, I would say, for example, our support team, what we're finding is that an increasing number of the questions customers have can be answered by AI. So that leaves complex types of things, right? So the time that, our support people have, they should be learning more about the higher technical things, like how APIs work and what are webhooks and how can they be designed and how can I help my customers with these more difficult, and even analytics, like how can I become an expert in exporting data from the LMS into your corporate BI tool and helping you come up with reporting that gives you outcome data. So I think it's identifying, and that can come from some mentorship within your company. If you freed up time, where could you spend that time, and then developing the skills and competencies you need to do that. So I guess those is probably what I would say. I think as a developer, like an engineer, learning how to run agents that are creating code for you is important. There are just some things you don't have to know. Like I laugh about the things that I learned when I was coding. You don't have to do those things anymore. Like you're not writing bubble sorts. Like the software has, over time, a lot of the things I learned to do is taken over by software. And so if you spend your time learning bubble sorts, like what good does that do you, right? So I think thinking through, where is technology going? Where is software development going? And how do I force myself to learn those new skills will be helpful, and honestly an advantage, right? Like when we look at any technology shift, often it's the younger, newer employees that get good at it faster, right? And so I think not that people my age cannot learn new skills, but in general, I think we've seen it several times on these different technology evolutions that the newer entrants into the workforce, in this case, they can be AI first and they don't have to relearn old skills. So I guess that'd be my advice. Embrace it in general.
And the fact that they haven't been, I don't know if it's the best word, but polluted by traditional corporate culture gives them an advantage.
Yes.
I realize, that doesn't dull the pain of receiving a lot of rejection letters, and it is a tough hiring environment. But in terms of them having a unique competitive advantage, I hope there are progressive employers out there like Kimberly Williams at Absorb who see that as as an attribute that maybe they're prepared to learn.
Right. I think for like a lot of them too, like domain expertise is super important. So why are our more senior engineers more valuable? It's not that they're necessarily coding faster. They might be, but what it is they really understand how we've architected the system, why we do what we're doing. And so using AI to understand a code base so that you can develop that domain expertise faster, I think would also be something I would try to do.
These days, at least at PeopleRain, when we post a rec, I assume it's similar in your organization, we'll get easily 1,000 applicants. And so the competition is fierce. I know that the applicants that stand out to me are the ones who are more than a resume. They're humans and they're passionate and they've thought through why they want to be at PeopleRain. And it means less to me what the role is. Mm-hmm. It means so much to me. What's in here? What's inside you that determines whether or not you're a good fit for our culture. How do you think about the kind of prevalence of AI tools and the shifting nature of work impacting the your solicitation process?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I think it's almost been a bigger burden for our TA team because, every talent acquisition platform has made it really easy to apply for a job. We get thousands and thousands of applicants like you do. And so trying to triage those and find the ones that are going to be a good fit. I would say the team has tried to embrace some tools to help them get to the set of people that they interview. But once we're in the interview process, I think finding people that fit our culture is really important. And we have a couple things that are part of our culture that I think play into the AI world. So one of them is just being scrappy. Like somehow you figure it out. And I think that mentality is important when you're having technology evolutions like we're having now. Because somehow they're not going to tap into some experience that they've had. They're just going to go figure it out. And I think that has been, yes, we want people to have the right experience because it sometimes is easier and better. But I would say oftentimes the most successful people at our company are ones that are just scrappy and can get it done. And, so I think that plays into their willingness to try new technologies. I think the other is, we put a lot of emphasis on continual learning, and so that helps. And we're asking people about what's the last thing they learned, how did they learn it, why did they learn it, was it kind of driven by intrinsic measures, or was it something that they were forced to learn to do? We like people who have this natural curiosity, and so I think that also helps us with AI and the adoption of AI. And then I think, finally, like and I can really thank our founder for this. He was an amazing founder. And I would say that the culture of a company often mimics an individual, the founder's personality. And is such a great person. And he had this philosophy that I'm not going to hire any jerks. And we've held true to that. Like if somebody says to me, what's the most important thing to protect about the culture? That's what I would say. Like, you come to work every day. You have to work a lot of hours with these people throughout the year. No one likes to work with people who are jerks, right? And we've all worked with them, went to school with them, and life is just better when you don't have to deal with that. And so once we get to the interview stage, I think we're looking a lot for those personality traits. And I think not every company looks for those same things. So you have to decide you might like kind of a command and control environment. And in that case, scrappiness isn't important at all because you're being told what to do, right? And our culture is different than that. So I think identifying what are you good at and what kind of culture fits you best, and everybody is different. And then, pursuing those kind of companies is helpful.
I hope that everyone listening to this podcast who would like to someday work in Kimberly's organization has been taking notes, because you just learned how to do it. Don't be a jerk and be scrappy, because those are two things that you certainly can't outsource scrappiness to AI. That's how to be the best human you can be at work, and to treat others with kindness and respect, which I think is the subtext there. So Kimberly, you said something earlier that I need to unpack, because I think it's important for everyone to hear. The future of learning at work is moving more to kind of, I think you said, in-context coaching, as opposed to maybe, watch a static video or, go through a certification or something. And the assumption is that when you complete the video, you're fully skilled, right? How does AI enable that? And like, how are you thinking about that actually operationalizing in-context learning?
Yeah, I think the first one is rethinking what that user experience looks like. So if you think about it historically, most of the time you're going to a website that is your LMS portal, and you're taking a course there. And so I think, what we've are doing is moving the learning into the systems you're already interfacing with. So potentially it's Slack or Teams, or if you're working on a help desk, for example, it might be Zendesk or ServiceNow, or it could be Salesforce. So how do we bring the learner experience into those systems? So that's kind of number one, I think is important. The second is thinking about integrations. So we've always had integrations. Most LMS companies for a long time have had integrations. They look a lot like if you're running a customer education program, say you've got a customer academy, you might be feeding data from Salesforce to say who is authorized to take this certification training type of a thing. So, and then you're feeding back potentially things like who took a course, did they complete the course, how long did it take, those sorts of things. All of that needs to stay in place, but I think there's two other elements that need to be added to the integration piece. The first one is that we as a learning system need to integrate into your company's proprietary knowledge systems, because a lot of what you're getting trained on is unique to your company. Could be a product, it could be a process, or even just culturally how you have difficult conversations and how you lead and manage. And so integrating into those knowledge sources, whether it's literally a knowledge system that you have or SharePoint, or other types of knowledge sources, we think is critical to both developing. If you want to develop a course for a group of employees, it makes it a lot faster to do because you can use AI to kind of pull information and generate at least your first draft of the course. But it's also important because potentially, Dan, the way you learn and the way I learn and what we need to learn is different. And so if you almost think about the ability to create a course for one person, very personalized, means that you need access to that knowledge system to be able to produce the right content. And then the other piece of integration is outcome data. So historically, there's a lot of let's push the LMS data into a BI tool that has which salespeople are making their quotas, which ones aren't, is there a correlation to courses they took, et cetera. But by having real-time integrations into outcome data, we can better target what learning each employee needs. So I'll give you an example. So here's a sales rep, and we can see that his price realization is lower than other people on the team. So can we push to him some tips, tricks, maybe even a course on overcoming price objections? So that might be an example. Another might be we notice that this particular employee doesn't do well when they compete against a certain competitor. So how do we give that employee training on that competitor and how we stack up against them? Or it could be this salesperson does not do a good job attach rate for an add-on product isn't strong. So how do we give them training on that add-on product? And so by linking to outcomes, it can tell the learning system what content to push to the employee. And then also what format, you might rather have it as a podcast, which we have that format. Other people might want something they can read. Other people might need a visual. So I think, the method that you're training also can personalize by employees. I think, we kind of touched on it, but using all that information to do dynamic instructional content is important, as I kind of talked about that, and obviously the AI. So I think that those are probably the four things that I'd say, which would be rethinking the UI, UX, the learner interface, expanding the integrations, using those integrations to develop dynamic courses and training content. And then the fourth would be personalization of both that content as well as a coach that can help you, simulate, practice different things, help you get jobs done.
Kimberly, it's a wonderful answer. As long as the AI is working as it should. The flip side of that is as you infiltrate these workflows kind of in the moment, in context learning more, the stakes get higher. You have a lot of responsibility for making sure that coaching is being received, it's accurate. Call them false positives. If the AI is making wrong coaching decisions, the impact can be significant on the employee. How do you think about that in your development team and just philosophically about mitigating against the impact of bad AI?
Yeah, I think that this is one of the shifts for the L&D department is thinking about how they can be the trainer of the model versus developing the content in the courses. So how do you train a model that here is your culture, here's how we do things in our company? So if you are coming in to say, I need to have a performance conversation with one of my people because they are late for work, that is probably going to look different depending on the company that you work for and their culture. So even when they would be developing their own new manager training program, as an example, they will embed in it how their company operates and sort of their cultural philosophy around these things. And so one of the shifts, I think, in making sure that AI does a better job than just what a large language model can do on ChatGPT without it is how do you, as an L&D department, train that model on what your culture is and how you want these things to be handled. Um, it's we've done it with, like sales things, like where we sat down with our sales leader and here's, 100 different scenarios. How would you want them to handle it type of a thing. So there's different ways that you can do it. But you also have to remember what you're comparing against often is what your manager would tell you, right? That's your other, so you're going to go to a manager, you're going to go to a mentor to get advice on something. They're not perfect either, right? So that it's kind of, how do you make AI continually better, but how do you also provide resources like a mentor that can help them as well to make sure that they've got the right messaging?
I like the way of thinking about that. It's the role of the quote content developer, or historically has been a content developer, to really own responsibility for what's going into the model. So you're training the AI as opposed to just feeding a course static content.
Right. Yeah. And I think, I think about a lot of things that people want guidance on in the moment. A lot of times I need to have this tough conversation with a customer, with an employee. It's uncomfortable. So that's why you're wanting to practice and go through coaching. The hallucinations of AI are unlikely to be so bad. Like, okay, Dan, tell their employee they're stupid. Like it would never probably do that kind of hallucination. And so you're just trying to like soften and shape it to your organization, I'd say. So you might have in some situations if you're a scientist and you're trying to do some R&D research on something, I can see where there might be a hallucination through the AI model that would be harmful to the company. But for a lot of what employees want, I think from at least a leadership perspective, it's unlikely to go so far upstream that it would be problematic.
Now, going back to the macro for a second, you're CEO of a very successful company. This might seem like an obvious question, but I think for someone in your seat, it's not necessarily. Look out 5 years. Is Absorb bigger or smaller in terms of headcount than it is today?
It's a good question. I think I would definitely say bigger. I think, for us especially, we have a really large market. And so even if for example, our developers get more efficient, let's say they get 50% more efficient, we are way more likely to deliver 50% more features than we are to cut people. That won't be true for every company, but certainly for us. So we tend to invest dollars back into growth, and we can do that because our market is big. And, but if you're in a really niche industry, I could see where you wouldn't have those same growth opportunities. So for us, definitely more employees. I would say that, for example, our team that does support, one of the things that we've talked recently about is how do we start cross-training them in positions that we know are going, because we may not grow our support team. Like we are going to grow as a company, but our headcount may remain relatively stable because they can handle more and more as AI helps. And so I think that's where we want to just be deliberate about, okay, here's the 4 directions we see somebody going. Some of them can move more on the sales side, and some of them can be more on the technical side. And then there's a few places in between. So how do we get them up the learning curve so that they can do some of those other jobs within the company?
The non-obvious insight there, as someone who owns a P&L, is that the pace at which the demand for new work will increase will outpace the rate at which productivity per employee will increase. Those are both true, but because the demand for new work is insatiable, it's growing at such a fast pace, you're more like, sorry, I didn't mean to put words in your mouth, but I'm just trying to restate what I heard you said, which I think is, it's important to tease that out, that's the direction you see going.
Yes. Yeah. And personally, I remember somebody telling me this early in my career, so it's not like AI has changed this, but if you work for a company that's growing, you're going to have more opportunities. And I think that in the face of AI, it's exactly the same thing, that even if a portion of your workforce or the positions you no longer need, you're growing as a company. And most companies would always rather find homes for their existing people if they can. I don't think that, even though we read all these headlines, I really don't think most CEOs like to do workforce reductions. They'd much rather, if they can, repurpose people.
Yep. Yep. Important for everyone listening to hear. That's the direction that we're going. It's yes, it is an AI enabled future, but yes, it's a human powered AI enabled future. I think that's an important distinction to make. Uh, Kimberly, this one's sped by. We're about out of time, but I'm not letting you off the hot seat without answering one last important question for me.
All right.
Your leadership journey. So I know that you've been instrumental in coaching young female leaders, and you're talking to a girl dad times two. I want you to give a pitch to all of the females who are listening who aspire to be, in the C-suite, in a CEO chair like Kimberly Williams, but maybe who through lived experience feel like they won't be given the opportunity. Convince them that they're wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would give the same advice to everybody, I think male or female. But I think one of the key things is finding a company that is open to people like you. So people like you can mean a lot of things. It can mean female, it can mean somebody who English is not their first language. It could mean somebody who has a different sexual preference. But one of the things I say is you can break the mold, but it's so much harder. So why not just go to a company where you don't have to break the mold? So that would be kind of my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice would be to try to stay in positions that are measurable. So this has been something I've worked really hard through my career, and it is amazing how often people want to I mean, I'm a CEO now, so they don't do it now, but where they would want to push me into, I would say, high gray matter positions, like strategy positions, but where you weren't delivering the results. And I would say that it's rare that a CEO is chosen from positions that don't deliver results. I think the other is if you are in a position where you're measurable, it's really hard to not acknowledge when somebody's doing a good job. And so one of the things that, my dad laughed at me, couldn't believe that I was just doing this. But I said, well, there's this concept in baseball called wins against replacement. And you basically quantify for every baseball player on your team, if you replace them with the next best available player, which is typically like a free agent or somebody not protected out of AAA, would your wins as a team increase or decrease? And so if you've got a positive WAR score, it means you're valuable to your team more than the replacement. And I said, I think this concept is an interesting one for business. And so everywhere that we have a rank of every employee and almost like a WAR score. Now, it's not every function because you can't do it in every function. But one of the things I said to my dad is, if we can take away some subjectivity, like, hey, I like this guy. He's a basketball fan too. And every time we get together, I enjoy my conversation with him. So he's good. Or this person, because they like cars and I like cars and we bond. If we can take away some of that subjectivity and replace it with outcome data, I think that there's a lot less ability it's a meritocracy. And that's what we all would like, is a meritocracy. And so I'd say for people who want to advance through an organization, trying to be in a job that's measurable. If you're not in a job that's currently measurable, how do you make it measurable? So I'm coaching somebody now, and I said to her, she runs learning and development. I said, find out what the big movers are from a business perspective, like what metrics are important. So, probably in her case, because it's managing a bunch of apartment complexes, property management, that it's probably vacancy rate. And so, how then can you figure out what are the best practices around leading a property and keeping your vacancy rates strong? And then how do you develop training around that so all of your property managers are following those best practices? And then to be able to say, hey, we did this training and it's helped to improve our vacancy rate. So even if you don't have a job that's measurable, try to figure out how you make it measurable, was sort of my advice to people.
Kimberly, that's such good advice. And I think that here's a feature request. I think you need to take this whole conversation and publish it into Absorb as a leadership coaching module. I don't make your product decisions, but yeah, just so many good insights. And just Absorb's really lucky to have you, and that's great advice to young leaders.
Yeah. Well, I'm lucky to be at Absorb. When I landed my first week, I remember just how special the people were. And I think my dad had coached me early on about not hiring jerks. He called them something else that starts with an A. But when I came, I'm like, wow, here's a company that's really done that. Like, it's my job, one, to protect that. So I feel really blessed that every day I get to show up with people that I really enjoy as people, consider them friends. And I'm very, very fortunate.
Kimberly, where can the audience learn more about you and the great work that you and the team are doing?
Yeah, well, of course, you can go to absorblms.com. Follow us on LinkedIn. That tends to be where we talk about our new features and some of our thought leadership. If we do any kind of benchmarking study, that's the first place you can typically find it. And then you can also follow me on X, or you can follow me on LinkedIn. And I tend to also share some of that same information or just some of my own personal observations about leadership.
I've been enjoying following your X feed. There are a lot of these good insights there as well. I'll go ahead and endorse your X feed. Kimberly, take me up on the offer. Come back again, share news about your progress, and give our audience more good advice. All right?
Would love to. Thank you, Dan.
Excellent. Well, that's Kimberly Williams from Absorb Software. And that is all the time we have for this week on AI and the future of work. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin from PeopleRain. And of course, we'll be back next week with another fascinating guest.
Yo, it's the end of the show, time to power it down. AI's the sis, but humans wear the crown. Team Human in the house, got the vibe so clever. Dan Turchin from PeopleRain, making us better.
We learned about AI for humans. We're ready to conquer the future, that's all for now.
See you next time.